mating aspect of it. She has met the male, the tar being the sperm packet. And it actually looks, if you take the lobster and you flip it over upside down, it looks like somebody had put two little blobs of road tar on her belly. It's actually what it looks like. Other parts of the Caribbean, any tarred lobster is illegal to harvest. In Jamaica, we haven't got that far as yet. But again, from a sort of knowing what it is and making responsible decisions point of view, it's not an unwise decision to let tarred lobsters go. Now, in terms of the specifics of the closed season, the Fisheries Division is aware of the fact that some fishermen, hotels, and restaurants may have lobsters in storage that were landed before the beginning of the closed season. And they've taken that into account when they've set up all the regulations for the closed season. Parties concerned are required to declare the quantity of lobsters in their possession in writing to the Fisheries Division at least 1 week before the beginning of closed season, which means about 2 weeks ago. They're also meant to inform the Fisheries Division of any intention to land lobsters prior to the beginning, in that final week. If you've got 30 pounds in the fridge and you've ordered another 100 pounds within that week, you need to declare both of those. What this does is it facilitates the inspection process. It is Jamaica. We have not got a lot of fisheries officers, and they have a lot of hotels to check during that season. It just makes their lives a lot easier if they know what they're looking for. Now, before people start complaining, oh, you know, you're not letting me have lobsters and I've got people who want them. If you were in Belize, we're out of lobster season now. Every lobster in this restaurant would have to have been sold or eaten by the 1st of August, or they would come in here and they would take your bar away. They're much more ferocious about it there, and at the end of the day, they have a lot more lobsters as a result. Now, why are lobsters disappearing? Why do you really need to manage this fishery? Well, it's an extremely valuable fishery, and as we saw before, lobsters don't survive well. For every breeding season, you've only got half a dozen lobsters per gram of female body weight that ever get back to the reef, even as tiny little babies, little juveniles. So throughout the Caribbean, lobsters are becoming smaller because we're fishing them, and the large ones take a while to get there, so if you catch them before they get there, they don't get there. So the average size of a lobster is getting smaller through the whole Caribbean, and at the end of the day, they're also getting much more scarce. A fisherman who deals in lobster has to work harder to catch fewer and smaller lobsters, so generally a whole lot less poundage. Now why? Because lobsters cannot reproduce or grow as fast as we want to eat them. Well, and eventually we will get to a point where we've consumed them all, and that'll basically be the end of it. Now, a little bit about the lobster itself. What do they eat? Well, as it says down here, a lobster will eat anything it can catch, either dead or alive. Now, how does that work in the ecosystem? Well, it'll eat crabs, dead fish, live fish if you can catch them, little nudibranchs and snails, conch. Lobster is actually one of the major predators of juvenile conch, which is interesting, and sea urchins. Sea urchins are very important on the reef because they consume the algae that eventually smothers over and kills off the coral. But sea urchins, when they're overpopulated, are also very dangerous because they will actually eat the coral stone and kill it, and so next time you get a storm coming through, that'll start breaking the corals off and kill them anyway. Now, another important piece of this whole pie is that lobsters eat several kinds of marine worms. These are often major coral predators. For example, this one here, they call it a fireworm. This worm actually eats coral polyps. It'll go along and it'll latch onto the side of a piece of coral and it'll eat all the polyps off that area and then work its way along. There's another snail that does the same thing. An overabundance of these, plus the snail, has killed off two of the major reef-building corals in the Caribbean, particularly in Jamaica, to a large extent because we're running out of lobsters and the things that eat these things. You've also got, though, encrusting and boring worms of a plumose variety. They actually either bore their little tails down into, or something along those lines, into the coral itself, thus weakening the coral structure. And again, next time you get a storm, the coral is not so strong, and it's more likely to break off and die when it hits the ground. So lobsters eat both of these things, which makes them a very important piece of the total overall ecosystem, the total system that produces our fish, our beaches, the nice reef systems that people like to snorkel on, and just as importantly, the nice reef systems that keep the big crashing waves from smashing into the beaches and washing them away. Now, at the end of the day, of course, what eats lobsters? Obviously, you and I. Lobsters are very tasty. Now, lobsters, though, are also very fatty. They're very fatty. Any nutritionist will always tell you that eating a lot of shrimp and lobster is bad for your cholesterol count. But they're also very nutritious. and they have a lot of energy in them. So everybody likes to eat them if they can catch them. So something like a nurse shark. A nurse shark has a gigantic big head, almost specifically designed for sucking a lobster inside out. A grouper, or any kind of a fish that can swallow a lobster, depending on the size of the lobster, will love to eat it. Something like the big jewfish or Goliath grouper, their favorite food and basically the majority of their diet is lobsters. They need that much energy to keep going. Octopus, love eating lobsters. And a stingray will, again, eat just about anything it can catch. If it gets a lobster, it's a great day. There are other seasons, though, in Jamaica. We've got two major commercial fisheries for export in Jamaica. One of them is lobster, which is partly managed by the lobster season that we're in, the closed season that we're in right now. We've also got a major fishery for conch. The fishery for conch moves around. It changes according to the population densities of what's occurring on the Pedro banks on the south coast, where the majority of the commercial fishery is occurring. And that's a changeable situation. So the dates change every year. Last year, it was from July 1st to October 1st. On the north coast, it tends to only be, the conch season only tends to be enforced, although it does occur in the commercial fishery on the south coast. And as it says down the bottom there, save some for your grandchildren. All of these management efforts, they all work the same, no matter what kind of fish you're dealing with, lobster, conch, whatever it happens to be. At the end of the day, that's exactly what you're doing. You're making sure that you have enough adult fish in the system to make sure that there are baby fish so that your children can enjoy those fish the same way that you are. And as often as not, the timeline is not even as long as that. Within our lifetime, it's possible that we will see some of these things disappear. Remember that possession without declaration is prohibited. So if you've caught lobster and the fisheries officer tells you to report it and you don't, you're in trouble. And otherwise, thank you very much. Please enjoy your lobster come the 1st of July. And has anybody got any questions?
Is it allowed to have imported conch then in the freezer, for instance?
Imported conch?
Yeah.
Where are you importing it from?
There is imported conch, I'm not sure.
The conch that you eat in Bahamas these days tends to come from Jamaica. Jamaica has the largest export conch fishery in the world. I would really doubt that anybody's importing conch unless you're getting a really good bargain from somewhere else.
What about the lobster? If you import the lobster?
To be honest, I don't know. Okay. To be honest, I don't know. I think that it still counts as local lobster. As far as I know, if you've got 100 pounds of lobster on the 1st of April, you're supposed to have less than 100 pounds of lobster no matter where you get it from, if they check afterwards.
How do you tell the difference between male and female?
Lifted skirt. How do you tell the difference between a male and female lobster? I haven't got any pictures that would really show you. During the season you can tell, because a female lobster, you flip it over and it's going to have a big blob of bright red stuff right there. Little jewels, and that's the berry. Or it'll have two black blobs, like black chewing gum, squished onto the bottom of it, between these two legs in the back. Otherwise, in the normal season, if you take the male lobster and you flip it over, it'll have two